Si on veut faire la traçabilité et la suivre, c'est parfaitement possible et c'est assez facile en réalité.
On n'est pas du tout à armes égales entre les associations et évidemment les lobbies de l'industrie.
With a mobile phone, you have the power to change the way you eat and improve the food you choose.
And welcome to a new edition of France in Focus. I'm Nadia Sharbi, and this week we're looking into the French approach to food quality. You join us here in one of Paris's famed covered markets, the Marché Saint-Germain, the perfect place to load up on fresh produce. Now, as the home of gastronomy, you'd expect France to lead the pack on issues such as traceability or controversial additives. But in fact, the country has had its fair share of food scandals, leaving consumers with a nasty aftertaste.
Milk, eggs, and meat. Basic food products that have sparked scandals in France over the last 10 years. In 2013, lasagna in France was found to contain horse meat, even though its packaging said it contained beef. At the heart of the affair, SPANGHERO. The French company was accused of false advertising after the government found it had used Romanian horse meat in products labeled as containing beef.
If we make the efforts, it is possible, even easy, to trace where products come from. Take the horse meat scandal, for example. If I had been the final manufacturer, I would have noticed the fraud, unless I was purposely blind to it.
In 2017, France is rocked by a scandal involving fipronil. The anti-parasitic drug is approved for pets, but banned for meat animals. Despite the ban, eggs tainted by fipronil were found throughout the EU market. Nearly 250,000 were sold in France alone in just a few months. Later that year, controversy hits France's Lactalis, one of the world's top dairy companies. Its baby formula was found to be contaminated with salmonella. According to French health authorities, the contamination was responsible for 37 cases of infant salmonella poisoning. But Lactalis initially refused to recall the product.
If there had been closer cooperation, I wouldn't have been obliged to recall 600 batches of potentially contaminated baby formula. I made this decision because Lactalis didn't accept responsibility. Lactalis failed.
Supermarkets also came under fire. Chains such as Leclerc, Auchan, and Carrefour admitted they continued to sell the baby formula despite the government ban. In total, over 7,000 tons of the product were recalled. Some say these safety scandals point to corruption in France's food processing industry. Health authorities respond to each affair by vowing to fight fraud and increase regulations. But the industrial food chain remains opaque, complicating traceability and denting consumer confidence in France.
So how can consumers hold the industry to account? Well, it's not as easy as it seems. In the face of bad publicity and increasingly stringent political response to such scandals, the French food industry knows how to wield its influence. Let's take a closer look now at France's powerful food lobby.
Whether it's keeping harmful components out of lists of ingredients or cracking down on advertising, the go-to solution in the food business is lobbying. Political pressure that MP Loïc Prud'homme witnessed firsthand when he headed up an investigative committee last year. The group's decision to limit certain additives in processed foods was practically unanimous. But when the bill was put to the Parliamentary Commission for Social Affairs, he was in for a surprise.
All of the clauses were thrown out by the La République En Marche party. What could that be down to if it isn't external pressure? Financial pressure. Lobbies seeking to maintain the status quo. There's a trickle-down effect. There's pressure on the MPs, but there's also pressure in the ministries, who make that felt in their parliamentary majorities.
From invitations to seminars and conferences to classic mail-outs, the food industry casts a wide net, seeking to influence actors at every level of the public sector, even those right at the top. Here, attempts to regulate the industry are often deliberately depicted as impediments to economic development, like when Stéphane Le Foll, then Minister for Agriculture, spoke out against the so-called stigmatisation of regional produce to ward off a new labelling system based on nutritional information. In France, the major lobby is ANIA, the National Association for the Food Industry, and its clout in the sector dwarfs the efforts of consumer rights groups.
We're clearly not on an equal footing. There are just 6 staff members here at Foodwatch, and when you compare that to industry lobbies, it's David and Goliath.
In 2016, investigative journalists from Mediapart revealed that certain amendments to health laws were actually written by ANIA and then simply signed by MPs. And when political pressure doesn't work, the industry goes straight to the source, that is, the scientific studies that legislation's often based on. Studies that can be thrown into doubt by questioning methodology or results.
The manufacturers rely on the specialized media, but also on a certain number of scientists who eventually become spokespeople for them. For example, to try to express probing scientific doubts about a study, when in fact these scientists have a direct relationship with the businesses in question.
Another tool at their disposal, bodies that appear to be independent but are once again linked directly or indirectly to the manufacturers. Research institutes, reference centres, non-profit associations, all organisations that allow lobbies to influence public discourse. They can also help deflect attention away from scandals and improve a company's image. One example in France, the company's importing palm oil. They created the Forest Conservation Alliance, which works to reduce deforestation.
For us, it's about a desire to push this channel to get to our business goal, which is we put a stop to deforestation in our supply chain. The sort of advertising that NGOs use, that definitely has an impact on our corporate image.
Clear virtue signalling, which is another way for the food lobbies to achieve their ultimate goal, competitivity at any cost.
Well, as awareness on the issue grows, perhaps the biggest obstacle faced by French consumers is information. Lay your hands on any ready-made meal or processed food, and most likely than not, the lengthy list of ingredients will leave you none the wiser. Thankfully, technology is increasingly being put to task, and I've come to a supermarket to meet with Pierre Slamiche, who's behind an app that helps translate and sift through all this data. Bonjour.
Bonjour,
Hello. Thank you very much for being with us. Could you start by telling us about the thinking behind Open Food Facts?
So Open Food Fact is kind of a Wikipedia for food. So it's an application that allows you to scan a barcode on a food product and get information about it, like for instance the Nutri-Score, which gives you in a clear note the nutritional quality of the product, or the Nova groups, which will tell you whether the food is ultra-processed or not.
Okay, so the idea is to empower consumers rather than tell them what's right and wrong?
Yes, basically our slogan is yes we scan. So it's the idea that with a mobile phone you have the power to change the way you eat and improve the food you choose.
And you said this is an international system, but is France ahead of the game on this sort of issue?
Well, when we started back in 2012, there was a couple of thousand people who were scanning their food, and now it's a mass phenomenon. There is an estimation that 30% of the French population is actually using an app to scan their food.
Now, your app isn't the only one. In fact, there's been some controversy over these apps actually contradicting each other. Is that not sort of complicating what is already a complicated process?
So Open Food Fact is a free database. So many apps reuse our data, including, by the way, scientists, but we choose to stick to the fact and to science. So for instance, the Nutri-Score, which was developed by a French researcher, the Nova groups about processing, which were developed by a Brazilian team, and so on and so on.
Tell us more about Nutri-Score, the system that this particular supermarket chain uses.
So Nutri-Score is a grade from A to E, a simple grade like in school that you can use to compare products in a supermarket.
Okay.
So A will be a product with little fat, salt, sugar, etc. And E will be the worst great.
So as you just mentioned, French consumers are increasingly on board with all these apps. What about the French food industry? Was it immediately on board? Was it hard to convince? How did that work?
Well, at first they laughed at us. And now that the rise of consumers scanning their food is growing, they are basically starting to change the formulas of their product, send us their data, and as a result, everyone benefits.
But I can see on the products around us that Nutri-Score isn't on every single packaging.
Yes, the industry managed to make it optional, but the Nutri-Score is starting to get steam, and several countries in Europe, such as Belgium and Spain, have opted to use it.
So you're telling me that Nutri-Score was created here in France, and yet in France it's optional?
It's kind of a paradox. It was optional in France. Belgium and Spain have adopted it. Our hope is that beyond those apps, it will be compulsory, so that everyone, even a 5-year-old, can basically choose the right product in the supermarket.
And do you think that perhaps these apps will also help consumers put pressure on the food industry to change?
Yeah, in just 6 years, we've seen that the power has shifted from the industry to the consumer. And we really hope that it will, in every country, it will be the same, and that products will be better for your health, better for the environment, and will have more healthy choices.
And be easier to access that information.
Clearly.
You mentioned the environment there. There is growing awareness here in France about environmental issues. Is that also a game changer?
Yeah, well, there's a climate urgency, and we're computing the carbon footprint on many products so that people can choose the product that's not only better for them, but also better for the planet.
Jaslemish, thank you very much for having spoken to us.
Thanks.
And with that, we leave this edition. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.